When someone is drawn to lie down underneath one of my sculptures for a moment of contemplation, to watch the way it changes, which one can only notice when spending time with it, that could be described as an experience of wonder. All of my practice is about discovery, where everything is an unexpected turn. Perhaps there's some of that wonder for me. That's what makes us feel alive. So I got a call from the public art program of Greensboro, North Carolina, letting me know that they had received a gift to create a signature artwork for their city. The Armfield Foundation had made this possible, and their past was from the textile industry. Could I think about creating a new iconic sculpture for a new flowering park that would be built in the center of downtown? I discovered that Greensboro was called the Gateway City. It was where 6 different railroad lines came together in a hub, like everything was passing through Greensboro. And I thought that was a really timeless metaphor for linking its past to its future, that this sense of being a gateway and a hub could transform. So I was looking at the railroad line historical maps from 1860, 1890, 1896, and I sort of began noticing that the textile mills corresponded with most of the major intersections of the railroad lines. And I began sketching sort of a form around that, linking it all the way down to the coast. And I put that drawing up on the board, and it looked surprisingly similar to the seed pods of native flora of North Carolina. And I thought, this is it. It's pulling in the history of the textile industry, the plant forms, and this industrial history of railroad transportation that really was the heart of Greensboro as a hub, as a gateway. I made several trips to Greensboro to walk the site by foot and come to understand the different grade changes of the site itself, and to think about how this artwork would fit in with the way someone would experience it as they walked from the new Performing Arts Center through this new garden. And I wanted there to be a place where you could have a moment of contemplation, to lie down on a beautiful lawn and look up and notice the changing patterns of wind in the surfaces of this textile. This specific location in downtown Greensboro is at a very exciting moment. And for me, I really looked at the view corridors from all the different directions so that this work could become a kind of beacon, a connecting moment that you see from many different directions as you come into downtown. This sense of placemaking that integrates with all the work around it, the new Performing Arts Center, the many different elements beautifully designed by the landscape architects. All of these parts fit together to create a compelling place. For me, it's all about discovery. That's what makes me feel alive, when I'm noticing the world and I'm learning something that I didn't already know. or at least I'm in tune enough to notice. So for me, that is the wonder of being alive. And that is at the center of my art. It's not a fixed thing, it's not an object you look at. It is this living, breathing textile structure that is in relationship with all of the changing aspects of nature, with sunlight, with wind, with rain. Scale is an issue I have to grapple with as an artist. I want to draw at the space of downtown and this city and this park. And at the same time, I want to speak to the individual person. And when I walk through, my body is a certain scale. And the sculpture, in a way, bridges those scales. There are these masks that become massive and greater than any of us. And yet it comes down to this hand knotted piece made by hand with fingers. So it's sort of bridging or mediating that scale question. It's making the city human sized. In addition to engineering, I'm using new material science in this work. The fibers that are holding in tension the shape of the railroad pattern on the top are made of a fiber that is stronger than steel, 15 times stronger than steel, in fact. It's ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. For the colorful part of the net, I'm using polytetrafluoroethylene, PTFE, which is the same thing as Teflon that you fry your breakfast egg with. And it's what they use in astronaut spacesuits because it is very robust with relation to the sun. And I love that we're taking old textile methods. Every rope you see is spliced by hand, sewn into itself in a way that they used hundreds of years ago in North Carolina. And yet we're combining it with textile of today with the developments of material science. And I think that becomes a metaphor. We're not cut off from our history. Our history informs us, but we are not held back by it either. The opportunities to grow are expressed in the very physical presence of this sculpture. To work with the forces of nature, like wind load, requires engineering of a very serious nature. I mean, my sculpture can withstand a hurricane. We model every single element, its dimension, its break strength. And our engineering team runs aeronautical analyses so that we understand how it's going to move and how it's going to respond. And that is what's so exciting for me as an artist, is that this is a living, unfolding experience. It will never be the same at any given moment as the winds come from the east or the south, or they begin to move upward and the sunlight filters through, and at night the illumination to create this kind of beacon to downtown. It's always different. And for me, I want to share this as a living experience, like a relationship that evolves and is always changing. And hopefully, like certain moments in your life, you might recall that the sculpture was moving in a certain way with a certain color when you walked with your beloved underneath it. My goal as an artist is to create a sense of place. where anyone can come and become more in tune with themselves. It's not so much about the piece, but about your experience that unfolds in relationship to that piece. That, for me, is what public art can be about, where it enriches a moment of our life, you know. And if one moment for one person is enriched, then I feel I have achieved my goal. Everything else is icing on the cake. Museums, for me, are the treasure trove of our culture. Our history is there protected for the future. I can remember as a kid when I had the chance to go to New York for the first time, and I went into the Museum of Modern Art and saw Jackson Pollock. Like somehow that was emblazoned in my memory. When I was a kid, I remember going to a history museum, the Henry B. Plant Museum in Tampa, Florida. And it showed how the railroads had created the city where I grew up in. And I remember looking at those old railroad ties and looking at the black and white photos of the wooden architecture that was built at the time. And it was really quite mesmerizing. And when I went to college, I was trying to think about what to major in, and I decided that history was the right major for me because it explains everything. It's like trying to understand why we are the way we are. And history seemed a way to get at that. So now that I have moved into becoming an artist with a focus on public placemaking, I still use history as my research method to understand a place and look for ways to give visual form to identity and culture. Greensboro has been such a gem in terms of revealing itself facet by facet as I learn more. It's a wonder. So I'm excited for this work to become part of life and to think about all the different people for whom it may become part of a moment in their existence.